How many of you have looked at species or looked at plants and animals and thought they are bound to their ecological niche, or that they somehow they're or that they have their place, that they are? I had thought that, but in the last year or so, that it's been challenged on two things. Mainly a book that I'm going to be talking about here called "The Next Great Migration" by Sonia Shaw, and also by a course that I had taken. So before we get started, my name is Scott Gillespie. I do realistic regen ag, which means that in my company, we give advice, but we don't have a sales pitch because we don't sell any products. So getting to the book, in this book, Sonia talks about the how humans move around mainly by for political reasons, because they're forced into other places by other humans. But also animals and plants and anything else that's living moves around too. So how she has traced this, and this is where it gets more into the science side of things, is looking at Linnaeus and how he was part of the European movement in the 18th century to classify and categorize everything. They were looking to bring order to the world that they were exploring. Now, an inadvertent or possibly a actual planned expectation or a planned part of this was to help to colonize, because by coming up with your own naming system for everything, you took away local names and local knowledge of things. So so that was one thing with it. What was this? It was interesting because this was they thought that they could categorize everything. The ancient Greeks, at least according to Sonia, didn't do that. They just saw things as always in a constant flow state. Now, how this relates to something that I've learned over the last year or so is I took a Blackfoot phenology class, which year-long online, where we did our own observations and came together. And one of the things I really noticed that, I should say Blackfoot are the indigenous peoples of this area. And it was a way to get to know a different way of doing things. And one of the things that was really fascinating to me that I learned is how things are always on the move. So in my area, in the winter, we have birds that have come down from the Arctic because they see this as a warm place to be, or more ideal food sources for them. And they can handle this weather. Whereas other ones that live here in the summer are off to the Americas, or even down to, well, as far down to South America. So things are always on the move. Now, this was in contrast to what Darwin had been seeing, because this was a similar time period. He could see things changing, but he didn't see things as being always stuck to their place, just that they were constantly adapting and moving around. Now, Linnaeus had his biases. One of the big ones is that he was convinced that everything came out of the Garden of Eden, so he was trying to fit everything into that narrative, that it had all moved out, settled in its area, and then that was it. And it got him, he had the European mindset that you were, these were the pinnacle of God's creation, and that everything else was subordinate. And she explores this more in the book. Now, this, in our recent past, led to eugenics because of the idea of seeing that good breeding was superseded any need for nurture, nutrition, and education for the masses, which from the book, and that we didn't need to focus on social programs because that was a lost cause, because we just needed to work on getting better humans. And so unfortunately that was where it went on things. So now I was surprised in reading this book as to how recent a lot of this stuff was. There was even a person who was a regular guest on the Tonight Show, which I always thought of as an entertainment show, but to warn of the problems of population explosions. And that was right up until, it was right through the time I was born in the late 70s. It was through that time. So it's recent, and which explains a lot of what we see today in the revival, or at least I guess the bubbling up of these ideas coming to the surface again about borders and immigrants and trying to hold things in our own place. Something fascinating too was her exploration of how species moved. One way that when the continents were still close to each other, or one big landmass, it made sense that things could have moved out from there. And then as the continents moved and got further apart, then they just evolved and did their thing in their own area. But it turns out that things can cross the ocean more than just humans, and more than just European humans, which was another interesting story within the book. It wasn't just the Europeans that could make it all the way across the ocean. But in our time, there was a 900 square foot floating island with trees and presumably animals and all kinds of other things, observed in 1892, moving along the east coast of the US up through Canada. If I have my notes right, I think it went for 1,200 miles, or I guess that's 2,000 kilometers. So it's not improbable that things can go vast distances across the ocean and come across tiny islands in the middle of a vast ocean. So things can move. And of course, you have to think of this, that, you know, you could go thousands and thousands and thousands of years and nothing makes it to a particular place, but then one incident and they make it there and it changes things. So yeah, that was one of the interesting things. I think I'll finish on near the end here, where she just talks about how we are going into a new era, or we're seeing it more and more, walls going up. And her thesis, or the argument of the book, is that things have always moved. There's always migrations of things as the changing of resources and for, at least for humans, political change. So anyways, I thought it was an interesting book. I'll put links to it in the episode description, and you can check it out. And if you need any help with regenerative agriculture, I'm in Southern Alberta, where we can work in person, which is in Canada. But of course, with all the remote tools we have now, it's very easy. We can work anywhere in the world. So with that, I will end this, and I will talk to you again the next time.